Welcome back to Kings of Columbus on the podcast. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis, and we are going through Ohio State's 2021 recruiting class on this show. Bill, this was something that I think some people delved into before the Michigan game. And the Big Ten Network did some stuff. They were asking me some questions last week, and that was one of the things they were focusing on, talking about this 2021 recruiting class. All these stars that we know, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke, Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyle McCord, Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Jackson, like all these primary guys, and that they had not beaten Michigan. And that was just not at all where my head was last week, because to me, it was sort of like this program, everybody involved with Ohio State wants to beat Michigan, quote, needs to be Michigan. There are times when I'm very interested in splicing the team into recruiting classes. I wasn't there last week. Were you?
No, not initially, no. And then it was weird to me when we showed up to interviews on Tuesday of last week, and there was a lot of discussion about that. And I couldn't figure out if that was because it was actually front of mind for the members of that class, or if it was because they were reminded of it by the Big Ten Network, who did that piece on that class. So I actually wonder the origin of that, because it came from the players. I think it's very interesting. If it came from BTN and the players just like, oh yeah, I guess we haven't, like, then I guess it's a little less interesting. But no, it's not something that I had front of mind for myself going into those talks last week.
And I do think it's interesting at times. I mean, for instance, the 2013 recruiting class that as sophomores formed the backbone of the 2014 national championship team, Ezekiel Elliott, Joey Bosa, Darren Lee, Von Bell, all those guys. I found that very interesting. Mm-hmm. And I was very much enamored with the 2017 recruiting class, Chase Young, Jeff Okuda, J.K. Dobbins, those guys trying to replicate what the 13 class had done, and that they fell short in 18 when a lot of them played. And then in 19, when they went undefeated and they made the college football playoff, you know, I dove into that in a huge way about how that whole class came together and what they were trying to do as that group, because it was so highly rated. So now that it's not in the rear view mirror, but like the thing that they were trying to do, they didn't get done. I do think it's a worthy evaluation now and discussion, because the 2021 recruiting class for Ohio State is awesome. Mm-hmm. Is it not?
Yeah, I think by the 247 composite, was it the best? I think it was the best, right? The best average player rating that Ohio State's had.
So it still overall was number 2 behind Bama.
No, I mean at Ohio State, like compared to like the 2017, 18, and 13 classes, I guess.
Like the average. Yeah, that might be the case. Yeah. It was like, I mean, it was super duper duper high. So yeah, like it's 95.05. The 17 class was 94.59. So that wasn't quite as high. The 2013 class we're referencing is in the 93s. So yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, that it was 2018 was 94. Yeah.
There were 13 players in the 247 composite ratings that were top 100 players in this 2021 recruiting class. And the thing that is remarkable about it is that so many guys hit. I think I heard a coach or somebody say this somewhere along the line, and it's still a guide that I use in thinking about a recruiting class, that if you get a third of them are real contributors, starters and guys who really matter, a third of them are help you in some way, or backups or special teams guys, and then a third of them just kind of wash out. They transfer, they get hurt. It never really happens. That, I think, is a guiding principle that I think people use. Do you think that's still right?
Yes, I know, because I had a conversation with Mark Pantoni, Ohio State's director of, well, he's the GM now, I guess, but director of player personnel. When I wrote a story about the 2015 recruiting class that was like kind of a miss until the very end when it wasn't. And I asked them, like, how does Ohio State evaluate a class sort of like once it's cycled through? And they used he said it's like a 10-80-10 principle. So the top 10% is elite, like special players. 80% of the class does something for you, like key contributors. And obviously that's a big, it's a wide range of what could be considered contributing. And then the bottom 10% is like washed out, didn't do much transferred. So I without looking at the numbers and actually categorizing this class myself, I would imagine that this class far exceeded that.
So 23 recruits in the class of 2021, 12 of them were gigantic, huge contributors to this team this year. So more than half were huge. I think it's 5 or 6 that transferred out, and 5 or 6 that, it's 6 that like were kind of backups and, we're doing something on this team, and 5 who left before this season who kind of didn't contribute anything. So to have 18 around, more than half of who are like just huge, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of those guys, of those 12, were made an all Big Ten team in their career. There were 5 who were as high as first team, 3 second team, and 2 third team. So they're not just like good. Like, I think that's kind of like a definition of elite. So we're talking about like 8 to 9 of those guys. You're talking about, like Pantoni says, 10% elite. I think this is closer to a third elite, and we're going to run through all the guys in a moment. But it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I guess it's twofold, right? One, that they needed a class that the composition of this class in terms of like both sides of the ball, positional strength, and all that stuff, and they like kind of nailed it, I think, for the most part. And then, like, on top of that, not everyone panned out, but like a large majority panned out, and like you said, a third of them ended up probably in that 10% category that Ohio State's looking for. So yeah, in that way, in terms of like what they did on the field, like just production, they hit. But then it's also hard. It's like, okay, factor in the team goals, and then like it gets a little more complicated.
And it did become one of those classes that this class had a chance. There are some classes like the 17 class they really relied upon. And in a lot of ways, some of those guys blocked the 18 guys. And then that 18 class either wasn't as talented or kind of their development was set back. I think that might be happening here, where they've relied on this 21 class so much. They had very little meaningful contribution from the 2022 class. Like, there were not a lot of second-year guys who really mattered for this team outside of Sonny Styles. And it's going to be very interesting a year from now, because, I mean, it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it cycles. But they're going to wind up next year probably relying on a lot of guys who haven't done much, because this 2021 class, so many of them played a lot as sophomores last year and almost didn't come off the field this year in year 3.
So what are you preparing people for 2022 to be a letdown like 2018 was? Because the 2018 class was a pretty big letdown for this program.
Yeah, it was. Well, that's not what this is not a 2022 recruiting class show, but like those things are not. They don't have to be a straight line, but I think they're at least connected. The context of that matters. Opportunity based on how many young guys ahead of you are playing. And that, because I mean, and again, this is what you want. Championship teams are driven by third-year guys. I didn't do all the but like that's just like a fact, because your best guys never make it to year 4 because they go to the NFL. And so this team was driven by third-year guys, and that's how it should be. And so, it's not bad. It kind of just is, but I do think people need to be aware of it.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning. And, I think you're right. I think it is where you want to be. And Ohio State, I think, too, has, again, this is more of a 22 discussion, I guess, but Ohio State has seen both sides of the coin, where like 2013 driven by a second-year class, very good. 2021 driven by largely a second-year class, like not that great, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's healthier to be driven by the class in its third year, like this team was this year.
So let's talk about that. I looked at the 28 guys who really contributed, who played meaningful snaps when it mattered on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. There was a clear dividing line on the defensive side in total number of snaps. Cody Simon played 301 snaps as the 14th most frequent contributor on defense. Jermaine Matthews played 191 snaps. He was 15th. So like Jermaine Matthews was clearly a backup who played in garbage time or played when guys were hurt. Cody Simon was an actual important part of the defense who played when it mattered. On the offensive side of the ball, Xavier Johnson played 210 snaps, and I still think he kind of is like a primary part of the offense. He has a role. Mayan Williams, because of his injury, he was 16th at 107. And then Carnell Tate played 239 snaps, but he did not play on offense against Michigan. And that was a signal to me that there were times maybe when it felt like Carnell Tate was going to have a role. He did not get on the field against Michigan except on special teams. So I took him out. I didn't include him because it turned out that he really did only play as much as we talked about him. And I brought him up in questions and like, okay, is he coming? Are you getting ready for this? I brought him up as much as anybody, and it never really happened. Julian Fleming was that guy. Carnell Tate was not. They never got to a rotation. It never felt like, okay, here's a key third down in a meaningful game, and Carnell Tate's on the field because they're going to try to do something. So I didn't include him in this group.
Yeah, I think that's right. Carnell was mostly like late game, and he played more when Emeka was out, but Ohio State also, I think, relied more on playing two tight ends when Emeka was out too. So I like you was waiting for him to become a larger part of the operation, and that I think it's correct to consider him as not being that.
All right, so then let's look at the 28 guys who did play. What year they were in college, Mike? If you can bring that up. Sixth-year guys, and this is kind of a new thing in college football, right? Like these sixth-year guys, the red shirts in the COVID year, they had three of them: Josh Proctor, Matt Jones, and
Xavier Johnson. They had 3 fifth-year guys. They had 7 fourth-year guys. They had 12 third-year guys, and they had 3 second-year guys. So that's the second-year guys are Sonny Styles, Davis Enigmignosin as a transfer, and now I'm trying to think of the other guy off the top of my head. Oh, Carson Hinsman. Those are the 3 second-year guys. So 3, 3, 7, 12, 3, right? That I don't think that balance is off. I'm just reminding people that third-year players at elite programs drive your team. I think this is the balance you want, right? Like I don't know. Maybe there isn't a right balance. I'm not sure. I think if I were a college football coach, I think I would prefer this balance than to be driven by like much younger players, or to have a bunch of older, like especially at Ohio State. Like you don't want, I think, a bunch of 4th and 5th year guys driving the team, because you recruit well enough that means they probably didn't pan out the way you wanted them to.
And like there are some things I think some people are bringing up. Actually, there's guys with years left because of the COVID thing that you wouldn't expect guys could be back. And there's a part of me that's like, well, that's great, but like, do you want to, even if it's a good player, do you want a 7th year? Do you want a 6th year? Like, when is CJ Hicks going to play?
Right.
Like it's time to get some of these guys on the field. Like that's healthy for the program. It's like burning down the forest to let the new trees grow.
Yeah.
Right. It's nothing against the trees, but at some point, and this COVID year, we're getting past it for the most part, right? That in 2020, nobody's eligibility counted, which I still think was a mistake by the NCAA. But that is not all a good thing. And if the result is you're like there's a class or two that doesn't develop because they never get a chance to get on the field. But in the end, I think it worked for the most part this year. When you think about the 6th-year guys we mentioned, when you think about 5th-year guys, Cade Stover, Tommy Eichenberg, Steele Chambers, like you want those guys around. So This is a winning team. I think this team could win the national championship. They got everything they need.
Can't wait to see how it plays out.
Is that helpful? Is that not helpful? So, okay. So I wanted to, I don't know. We got to set the table, because I do think this is not what this show is. Is this the last great recruiting class at all? It's not what that's not what this show is. But some stuff has changed. It's just like and the thing about this class, Landis, is, again, we all know that when you look at the rankings, sometimes they're so good at quarterback and receiver, it lifts them up. But when you see what they did at defensive end with Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, when you see what they did at corner with Jordan Hancock, at running back with TreVeyon Henderson, this was not only the passing game that was highly rated recruits. This was a pretty good breadth of talent across multiple decisions on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway with the class when it signed a couple of years ago, was because they had some really lean years of cornerback recruiting and just defensive back recruiting in general that was rectified a little bit with this class. Especially in hindsight, maybe we didn't think Denzel Burke would rise to the level, but he certainly did. And defensive line too, they were just kind of, I guess, defense in general. There was a worry, I think, that Ryan Day was going to quote unquote sustain the recruiting success of Ohio State, but when he really drilled down, it was like, is he actually doing that, or is he just getting 5-star receivers and 5-star quarterbacks that are bumping up the average? And otherwise, there's some holes in this class. This class didn't have very many holes. I can't quite recall everyone they wanted to get in this class, maybe outside of J.C. Latham that they didn't get, but it felt like they really landed on a bunch of their top targets and addressed positional needs probably as best as they could.
And we're not going to talk about him individually in the same way because he wasn't part of the recruiting class, but Josh Simmons was a third-year player who was a starter on this team. So they did not get the left tackle in this recruiting class that they needed, but they wound up with their left tackle being out of this recruiting class. He just transferred from San Diego State. I want to brush on before we dive into these guys. The players who did left, and we just briefly have to talk about Quinn Ewers because he was at the top of this class after he reclassified. Number one player, went to Columbus High School for a year and then went to Texas. What do we make of it? Is it literally nothing because Kyle McCord's in the same class and Kyle McCord's a starting quarterback and it's literally nothing? Or is there something there of like, what could have been?
I think there's something there of what could have been. I would push back on anyone who's like, oh man, I wish we had Quinn Ewers. It's like I think Quinn has been a fine college quarterback and has not lived up to the billing, but it certainly would have made for a different competition this year, right? Like there's no guarantee that Kyle McCord would have been the starting quarterback had that situation played out normally. I don't know like that it was mishandled necessarily by anybody. I like once Quinn Ewers made the decision to reclassify, it just kind of felt like a losing proposition for everybody. And then it kind of unraveled for Ohio State. But yeah, you can play the what if and go through the alternate histories. And, I definitely listened to a conversation that Quinn Ewers would be this team's starting quarterback this year had he not reclassified. I think that's very possible, if not likely.
Yeah, I agree. It's not nothing. So when you have the number one recruit in the country and he's here and then he leaves, I like to completely brush it off as like, weird circumstances. What are you going to do? It's like you had him in the building. And in a world where they wound up in a competition, maybe there would have been more of an emphasis coming out of spring if you had three guys instead of two that are like would McCord and Ewers both stuck around into August as a year three guy, not knowing who knows, but it would give you another option. So I don't think it's nothing.
Well, it would have played out this. I mean, it just would have been McCord versus Ewers instead of McCord versus Brown, right?
Yeah. So, or even that like you have to decide like McCord versus Ewers to decide then who's going to go against Brown. That like they're just what I don't think Kyle McCord and Quinn Ewers both would have been on this roster this fall.
I agree.
So just would have given you another option. All right. Another guy who actually did play here and is gone is J.K. Johnson. Was the number 50 recruit at corner, wound up playing 300 snaps for this team last year. And he was forced into that role, maybe a little early because of other things, inconsistency from other guys, injuries, and just did not play well. And they basically wound up trading him for Davis and Igbinosun, which was a great trade. So Igbinoson's only a second-year guy, but I think, they were reluctant in previous years to get a huge guy in the transfer portal because they wanted to give their young guys a chance. They gave a young guy a chance. He didn't play well. They went and got a starter level, and Igbinosun was really good.
Yeah, that's a net positive, I think, for Ohio State.
So, I mean, I think it's, I think it's okay. I think it's kind of fair to think of it that way. Another guy who left, Ben Chrisman on the offensive line, number 124 recruit, went to Kentucky, just like never worked out here.
Yeah, just like a depth offensive lineman who ended up getting recruited over a little bit via high school and transfer portal additions. And I think probably just saw the writing on the wall that if he was ever going to play here, it was going to take a couple years. So I think it made sense for him to leave.
And then a couple other guys, all in the secondary, were just lower rated guys, kind of that never worked out. Andre Turrentine wound up at Tennessee. Jansen Dunn wound up at Kentucky, and Jalen Johnson wound up at Memphis. And stuff happens, right?
Yeah, of that trio, I actually like Jansen Dunn quite a bit. I believe he got hurt too last year, so he ended up not being maybe as much a part of the picture as he wanted to be. But he was the one guy of the safeties who left that I thought maybe had a future here if he would have stayed.
Okay. Now let's get to the guys that actually stayed and played at a very high level and what we think of them. We'll do all that next on Kings of Columbus. All right, we're going to run through these guys about 5 minutes each. Just talk about what they did here, what their futures might be. On the offensive side of the ball, that includes, let's see, some very talented players. It's Kyle McCord at quarterback, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka at receiver, TreVeyon Henderson at running back, and Donovan Jackson at guard. And then again, Josh Simmons, starting left tackle, was not in the recruiting class, but is a third-year guy. So like we sort of count him in some way, but we're not going to quite run through him like we did the other guys. On the defensive side of the ball, that's Denzel Burke at corner, who as a true freshman in 2021 led this team in defensive snaps, which remains one of the crazier stats that you'll find in the last 20 years of Ohio State football. He was the first, I think, true freshman to start his first game since Andy Katzenmoyer, and then he led the 2021 team in defensive snaps. Remarkable. Also at corner, Jordan Hancock. Defensive ends, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. Defensive tackles, Mike Hall and Tyleek Williams. And then special teams, Jesse Mirko at punter was also in this group. So we're going to go in order of career snaps. And again, a shorthand. Like if you play 1,000 career snaps, that's pretty good, I think, because depending what position you play, like an offensive lineman will play like 700 to 800 snaps if he doesn't get hurt in a season. Some other guys that you're not out there every single game. You'll play between like 500 and 600 snaps. And so if you play 1,000 snaps, that means you kind of mattered for at least 2 years. 1,500 snaps is like you were like a dude for at least 2 years. So I think, do you think it's a fair guidepost?
Yep. I think that's right.
All right. So let's get to Denzel Burke because he has played more snaps than any player in this class. We are using the 247 composite ratings as recruits because that takes into account a bunch of recruiting services. He was the number 199 overall recruit, 1,825 career snaps. He's a 3-year starter. He made first team All Big Ten this year. He was, it's not an unusual career because we've seen enough guys have this arc now. I think we're not to the point of talking about like sophomore slumps at Ohio State, but we've had multiple guys who were really good as true freshmen have a hiccup in year 2 and then come back and are really great in year 3. And I think Burke probably exemplifies that as much as any recent guy.
He does, and part of the sophomore dip was injury related, right? So to be fair to him, it's probably worth mentioning that he didn't practice a whole lot in his second year, include like in camp and then really throughout the season as he dealt with various injuries. And clearly that impacted his play on the field, and it was a level of play that he was certainly unhappy with. But yeah, he bounced back as well, and probably better than most guys we've seen bounce back from a second year like that. To the point where we were asking like. Not only is it that Denzel Burke is very good, like is he going to reestablish the first round cornerback pipeline for Ohio State? And I don't know. Maybe he comes up slightly short of that, but I mean, incredible career for him. Like to be not a lower rated prospect, but lower rated in the context of this class to become like the man in this class. I think it's incredible.
Exceed, meet, or not quite meet expectations?
Far exceed. Yeah.
The number 199 overall recruit. Again, this is a guy that like Brian Hartline kind of got, right? He's from Arizona. They looked at him as a receiver, wasn't there as a receiver, but Hartline was like, this guy's a dog. We need to get this guy. Isn't that the story?
Yeah. And that's like kind of the craziest thing about it is they brought him here as a cornerback and he like didn't play much cornerback in high school. And then he played some enough that they thought he could flip the defense as a college player. And then he kind of showed up and just was not only a cornerback, but the cornerback from the time he got here.
So do we have to assume that he's off to the NFL?
I think so, right? Like it's not a slam dunk that he's a first round pick, right? And I'm assuming he would be a second round pick. I would think. So is the opportunity to play yourself to a first round pick enough to draw you back here? I don't know. I think I would assume that he's gone.
I mean, I think he's better than some guys who have been first round picks.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
He's a better corner than Damon Arnett was at Ohio State. I think he's a better corner than Garyon Conley was at Ohio State. No slight to those guys, but okay, you're not Denzel Ward, you're not Marshawn Lattimore, you're not Jeff Okudah, but it's like, okay, there's plenty of room for sort of like the next tier where you still are a first round guy. And I think that's where I would consider him. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is not inside information. This is not talking to agents. This is not anything. This is just trying to gauge on the level of play that the guy has shown and what normally happens in these situations. I also don't know what he could do to help himself. Like he did get thrown at this year. He had a lot of pass breakups. I thought he played very well. He stayed healthy. He showed what he can be. I'm not sure what a fourth year of starting. Also, I think the difference of like, you've been here 3 years and you've started 3 years. This guy has so much film. I think he's done almost everything you can do.
Yeah, I think if I were to say coming into the year, the one thing I would want to see from him to believe that it was time for him to go to the NFL, it would be better ball production, and he had that this year. I know he didn't have a ton of picks, but for me, ball production is just like making plays on the ball, and he definitely did that like almost every time he was thrown at this year. So I'm with you. I don't. It would be purely like a unfinished business kind of thing, more so than it would trying to help myself kind of thing, because I think he's done everything he can in the eyes of the NFL.
And I mentioned that on a previous show, right? That happened after the 2007 season with a lot of the veteran guys on that Ohio State team after the loss to LSU. They wanted to come back after losing 2 straight national championship games and take another run at it. James Laurinaitis, Brian Robisky, Alex Boone, Marcus Freeman, that group, Malcolm Jenkins, those were the 5 main guys who all sort of decided to do that together. I don't know. So this is sort of based on what have you done and what are you going to do in the NFL. It makes sense, I think, to assume Denzel Burke is gone. All right, next up in career snaps is Donovan Jackson. The left guard for this team was a top 25 national recruit out of Texas with Ohio ties, dad from Cleveland, 1,698 career snaps right now. Started last year, started this year, first team All Big Ten both times. Just being frank, he should not have been first team All Big Ten this year.
He should not have. Austin and I talked about that on a episode of Snap Judgments that you can find in the podcast feed or on YouTube. It was a misread on the part of the Big Ten voters, I think, to look at Ohio State's offensive line and assess that Donovan Jackson was the best one of that group. And that includes the Big Ten coaches, because I think Matthew Jones was clearly the better player this year.
I had an All Big Ten vote. I put Matt Jones on the first team, and I did not put Donovan Jackson on any team. So this is a 5-star who I think we all saw. It's like, okay, like I think he followed the 5-star path of, right. You're learning in year 1, and then you start in year 2, you start in year 3. Do you think he played better last year than he did this year?
That's a good question.
Because it felt like he started slow this year and then got better.
Yeah, I would say he played better this year. Okay. Like the lasting image for people right now is him getting dumped on his butt while Kyle McCord gets hit on the interception. I thought prior to the Michigan game, maybe like the 6 or so games before that, he was probably playing the best football of his career. So if I'm taking that into account, I think I would say that this year was. I'll say this: it was better than last year, but I think definitely not as good as people expected it to be in terms of a step from last year to this year.
What do we factor in terms of starting next to a new starter at center in Carson Hinsman and starting next to a new starter in the Big Ten in Josh Simmons? Does that have an effect on a guard?
Yeah, I think it does. But that was also most kind of true for Matthew Jones as well, right? Like it was a little different because Josh Fryer wasn't totally unfamiliar to Matthew Jones, whereas Josh Simmons was to Donovan Jackson prior to the season starting. And I think it was evident early on that the left side of the line, and I would include maybe Carson Hinsman in that, we're not always in lockstep in terms of like working together to combo on run plays or like to trade stuff off in pass protection. And I think it got better over the course of the year, but I think that dynamic definitely impacted the early play we saw from Donovan.
All right. Exceed, meet, or not quite meet expectations?
I think I'd have to go not quite for being a 5-star and a guy. I believe he was the top ranked offensive lineman in the class, or maybe he was this. Yeah. So, and like part of that for me is influenced by talking to people when Ohio State got him, and not necessarily people at Ohio State, just like people in the recruiting industry who thought that at the time Donovan Jackson was the best offensive lineman, regardless of class in the country. So like that framed my expectations for him. And like if he were a 4-star and played the way that he's played, I would probably say meet. But being that highly regarded and then playing this way, I think you have to say not quite met.
Do you think he's gone, or you think he has a chance to maybe be back?
I do not think he's gone. I think we've not heard a ton about like what kind of decisions are going to be made. The one thing we have heard a little bit is that Donovan Jackson has been a lean toward coming back next year, because I do think Ohio State is expecting all 4 of the 5 offensive line starters back for 2021, which would include Donovan Jackson.
Okay. Do you think Justin Fry, whose name is at least in the mix, it seems like, at Indiana in one way or another. If Justin Fry's not back, although Justin Fry didn't recruit him, I don't know. It would just be like your third offensive line coach because he came in understud.
Yeah, I don't think that would have much of an impact on it. I don't believe Justin Fry is going anywhere. But even if he did, I think the fact that he didn't recruit Donovan, I don't think impacts that.
Yeah, just bring back Ed Warner, you'd be fine. Third up is Marv. So Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the range of like a top 100 recruit, but like was not like the man in this recruiting class, and then became the man. 1,658 career snaps, 2-year starter, first team All Big Ten each of the last 2 years, first team All American last year. Certainly will be that again this year. One of the 3 finalists for the Biletnikoff Award as the best receiver in college football. Certainly exceed expectations. Certainly gone.
Yeah,
but what do you think? I got asked a lot of questions about Marv with the Big Ten Network stuff last week, and I just said I think he's like the final evolution of an Ohio State receiver. It is, I think, the fact that this class, Marvin Harrison Jr. included, never beat Michigan, never won a Big Ten title, never won a national title. I think it's something, but I still think he will be viewed as the best receiver in Ohio State history. Do you agree with that?
Ooh, yeah, probably, because there aren't a lot of other guys in the conversation who have like the kind of trophies that would supersede what Marv has.
Chris Carter didn't win a national championship either.
Right. So it's like who in that conversation has won a national title? It's like Michael Thomas and Michael Jenkins, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think Marvin will go down as the best to ever play here. Even if his stats will end up not quite matching up, but like the 2-year production that he's had here is insane. And
it's just, I think Ohio State fans have been conditioned a little bit, unfortunately, by what happened with Jackson Smith and Jigba last year. But you also just think of like Braxton Miller and Terrell Pryor and Beanie Wells. And there's just like a lot of too many, unfortunately, for Ohio State fans, guys who have great years. And then when they come back in their last year, like something goes wrong. And like nothing went wrong. He hurt his ankle against Notre Dame, but he fought through it. He played through it. He had 8 receiving games of more than 100 yards. Like he didn't really have a stretch. Like, Notre Dame kind of focused on him, but Ohio State found a way to win anyway. And then kind of after that, I guess Rutgers took him away a tiny bit, but like he kind of was Marvin basically every game. And that neither injury nor circumstance prevented that. And I don't, it's no fun as a fan to go through a season holding your breath of like, oh, is our best player going to get hurt? But, it's happened at Ohio State. And so for Marvin to have a great year in his last year was cool.
Yeah. And I also, too, this won't make Ohio State fans feel any better, but like 2 games against Penn State, Marvin was awesome. 2 games against Michigan, Marvin was productive. And the game against Georgia, he was incredibly productive until he got knocked out of the game. So like he showed up. I know the teams didn't have the results you want in those games, but in terms of a big time player showing up on big stages, I think he did it more often than that.
And I do think receiver is one of those positions where it's not quite as much like it's your job. Like I said, going into the Michigan game, Ohio State has to let their best player win the game for him. So I think there's opportunity there. And when he caught the 44-yard deep shot right before the half, I was like, okay, this might be happening. Then he got a touchdown later. It might be happening. But I don't think a receiver bears as much responsibility of like, I can't believe Marvin let them lose that game. As much as you might have a quarterback bear that responsibility, maybe an offensive line, maybe a defense. I think receiver, just by circumstance, you get a lot of upside and maybe not quite as much blame because it's like, well, I didn't throw him the ball enough.
Right. Short of like we threw him the ball 7 times and he dropped it 3 times. Like I think, but that's not what happened with Marv.
No. So Marv good.
Marv good. Yeah. I remember I went to St. Joe's Prep when they got Kyle, I think, and I interviewed Kyle and Marvin together. And like obviously he's Marvin Harrison Jr., right? So like that name carries cachet, but like I saw him, I think, as a sophomore, and I was like, this guy, he looks like he weighs 100 pounds. Like, what is he going to be when he gets to college? And then he showed up to college and he was like physically transformed to the point where he looked like a monster, and then he became Marv. So shows what I know. I guess that's good evaluation by Brian Hartline.
And I do want to say, so like Robin Wilson from Michigan took a shot at Marv after the game last week of like, whatever, they're Louis and we're whatever, I don't know, which is one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, I don't know. like Marvin Harrison Jr. is a better player than Roman Wilson, but Roman Wilson won 3 straight against Ohio State. So like Roman Wilson gets to talk, but it's always like, well, if Roman Wilson was as good as Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe he'd be that too.
Right.
I do think Marvin, and again, our interactions with him are not everything, but for the fact that he is the son of a Hall of Famer, that he is going to be a top 5 draft pick in the NFL, that people have called him the best player in college football, was very much, I always thought, like a very grounded guy.
Yeah.
Like he was not a diva at all. I thought zero diva vibes in terms of, it feels like how he interacted with the media or his teammates while at Ohio State.
No, I never picked up on that. And it's not even like, well, he can be one way when you talk to him in a different way when you're not, but vibes are vibes, I think, right? And I never picked up on anything close to that with Marvin.
Yeah. Which is, if he was a diva, we'd tell you.
Yeah.
We thought he was. We don't
Michael
know
Thomas
sure.
is a diva. Yeah, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I remember having a conversation with Michael Thomas. Like I gave Michael Thomas credit for like not complaining about not getting the ball more because he had like 700 receiving yards. And it's like, you could have had 1,400. And if you would have had 1,400, he would have been a first round pick. So he didn't complain about that. But like the rest of it, in every other way, like he was a diva.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, is he related to Keyshawn? It's like, yep. It's like, okay. and again, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying like,
no.
I like divas. Some would say I'm a diva. So like, what are you getting? Like, I'm not anti-diva, but I know some people are. And I'm just saying Marv has none of that. So, and I think Michael Thomas's greatness, and he was great in the NFL. I think some of that came from that.
Absolutely.
But also because Michael Thomas was a diva, but also like worked his butt off just like Marv does.
Yeah. Tuimoloau
Thomas would go out and catch 1,000 balls, just like Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to go out and catch 1,000 balls. So, but they are a little different personality.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is JT Tuimoloau. And again, to think about this now, how this was late in the process. He's late in the summer. He decides to come to Ohio State as the number 4 recruit in the class. 1,410 career snaps, actually plays as a freshman in 2021 when he just showed up. And then his first team all Big Ten last year and this year. What do you make of JT's contribution as a Buckeye?
Good, like met expectations, I think. I don't know that he exceeded them, right? And the expectations for a 5-star defensive end here are higher than most places, and higher than the baseline, I think, for even a 5-star. So maybe JT didn't quite meet that, but he has the memorable game of all games against Penn State, and just like a really, I think, solid run of play as a stout defensive lineman against the run, and a guy who, probably was never the pass rusher that people hoped he would be, but I think expecting him to be that was probably a misread on his skill set from the jump anyway. So like really good, productive, disruptive player, I think.
Yeah, I think he's a very good football player.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he's like an exceptional defensive end when it comes to like the things that you associate with being a defensive end, which is just about getting after the passer. So again, the context here, it was hard to sort of express, like I kind of always felt that about him, but like, for instance, Aiden Hutchinson helped wreck the Ohio State Michigan game in 2021. And I don't know, I have not gone back and rewatched, like, would there have been an opportunity for JT Tuimoloau to wreck the Ohio State Michigan game in either of the last 2 years in a way that he wrecked that Penn State game last year, in a way that it's like, in a way that Chase Young wrecked a couple games in his career where it's like, well, the offense basically can't function because we can't block that guy. And yes, he had it against Penn State, but even that Penn State game still, like there's one strip sack, like a great pass rush and a strip sack. A lot of the rest of it is skill, smarts, anticipation, film study, knocking down screens, swatting passes. He wasn't a guy who went out and just destroyed the opposing offensive tackle 12 snaps in a game. And that's not a criticism, but I just think it's part of who he was. It's like a minor who he wasn't, but he was so good at so many other things and like doing his job, setting the edge, playing well against the run. He's an excellent football player, but he's not in the Bosa Young class of Ohio State defensive ends. No,
he's more like Cam Hayward, right? I think that's the more appropriate comparison for him, and what I think he's going to be in the NFL. I think you're right. Like I thought going into this Michigan game that there was going to be an opportunity for both of Ohio State's defensive ends to wreck the game. Might be too strong, but have a real impact. Because I didn't think Michigan's offensive tackles are very good, and I think they did against the run, but they didn't get after JJ McCarthy the way that I thought was possibly on the table, and that is probably true of JT's tenure at Ohio State. Just like a little short of consistently dominant all the time, I think.
Yeah. And again, that's just a discussion. It's not a criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Exceed expectations, meet, or not quite?
I would say meet.
Because they were so high.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh my gosh, is Ohio State going to get this top 5 player from Washington in the summer? Holy moly, this practically feels like Terrell Pryor.
Right. It was, it was a crazy recruitment that I've covered at Ohio State in my 10 years on the beat. Just like the most scrutiny of any recruitment. So that heightens the expectations. You're right. But I think if I'm being realistic about the kind of player that I think JT is, I think he met expectations.
Yeah. I definitely did not meet expectations, but I think to exceed it, it would have been like All-American, game wrecker in the lineage of Bosa Young. Yes. And I think we're a step short of that, which is really more about expectations than anything else. Gone?
I think he's gone. I think he's going to be a first-round pick.
Okay. Next up is TreVeyon. Is that right? Yeah. No. It's Emeka. It's Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka's next 1,226 career snaps, was the number 10 recruit in the class of 2021. Another guy from Washington State, was the number 1 receiver in his class, a 2-year starter, second team All Big Ten last year, third team All Big Ten this year. Again, on the list of like, oh no, a really good returning Ohio State player got hurt. He qualifies for that. At least he was able to come back at the end of the year. But it's certainly his over-under on receiving yards coming into this season was like 1,000, and like it just got wiped out. He had no shot at doing that because he missed the whole middle chunk of the season. It just was interesting that when they came in, it was maybe going to be like, oh, like Emeka's going to be the dude and Marvin's his sidekick. And instead it's more that a Marvin's the dude and Emeka is his sidekick. But being the sidekick to the best receiver in college football is not a criticism. And they both had 1,000 receiving yards a year ago, which was a very rare thing. And then Emeka, the injuries kept him from doing that this season. How will we think about Emeka Egbuka?
Yeah, I mean, they were production-wise, they were practically even as sophomores. So I didn't consider that a sidekick situation. I just thought they were kind of working in tandem together. And Marvin got more shine because of his name, and not to say that he didn't deserve it, but I actually thought Emeka was probably overlooked a little bit as a sophomore when he should not have been. It's hard for this year, right? Because he missed so much time. He missed like half the season. So, and then when he was out there, I guess like after the Notre Dame game, I don't know that even when he was on the field, he just didn't quite look himself. There was a brief kind of glimmer of hope that he would get there in the Minnesota game, and then I don't know that we saw it against Michigan. He had that drop over the middle there, and he scored a touchdown, but wasn't super productive in that game. So I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard evaluation for me, and it's mostly due to injury and wanting to give proper deference to the fact that guys just aren't always the same when they're trying to work back from an injury.
74 catches, 1,151 yards, 15.6 yard average, 10 touchdowns last year. This year, 35 catches, half as many, 451 yards, 12.9 yard average, 4 touchdowns. Injury, no more CJ Stroud. Certainly a factor in that. CJ had always had a good feel, I think, for getting the ball to guys in the slot. I also think this is one of those where, and it's just one of my favorite ways to talk about Ohio State players is whether you are like the next evolution. Like, are you a half step better than the guys before you? And when I think about Garrett Wilson's year in the slot that gave way to Jackson Smith and Jigba's ridiculous year in the slot, and now we had Emeka last year and Emeka this year, Jackson Smith and Jigba had the most receiving yards in a Big Ten season ever in 2021. So it's like, well, he wasn't that. It's not really like a thing, but also it's somewhere in there of like this, the evolution. How could it keep going up?
Yeah.
But when you think about the best slot receiver in Ohio State history, let's say, which really is a thing sort of in like the Ryan Day era more than anything else. But you think about maybe like where Ohio State was with KJ Hill and Paris Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they moved Garrett Wilson into the slot, and it's like getting married, the birth of my children, and Garrett Wilson moving into the slot, like the greatest things that ever happened to me. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then Emeka, like like Emeka is not the peak of that, which is not a criticism, but is part of the discussion.
He's not the peak of it in terms of production, but I do think he kind of had pieces of all like the predecessors at the position in his game, right? It looks like I think there was excitement of what that could look like because of the skill set that was kind of unique, right? He's like kind of built like a running back. He plays with physicality, but it just never really came to fruition. And I don't know. Part of that, I guess, is Ohio State's scheme, and obviously part of that is just not being healthy enough, I think, to be as much a part of the offense as Ohio State wanted them to be this year. So, like, I agree with you in terms of like linear progression. It wasn't like keep moving up with the slot receiver, but I don't want that to take away from like what I think is a very talented player in Emeka.
Why didn't they hand him the ball in the Michigan game?
I don't know. I don't know why they haven't really handled the ball that much in his career. It's kind of weird to me. I've always, not always, like he's only been here for 2 years or 3 years, but like I've likened him to like a Deebo Samuel type of player, and I don't know, and I think that's what he will be used as in the NFL. And I don't know why Ohio State was like never 2 feet in on that idea. It was like kind of halfway in.
9 carries, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. This year, 5 carries, 25 yards. His last carry was in the Rutgers game. So, I mean, it's like they gave him the ball. They handed him the ball on 4th down against Notre Dame. And then, it didn't work. But they didn't like to not hand him the ball. I guess, is it because TreVeyon is your outside guy there? You don't need a receiver to do that?
Maybe. I don't know. They gave Xavier Johnson the ball. I don't know why. I think Emeka Egbuka could have done some of that stuff. So, and that's not me taking a pot shot at Xavier Johnson. It's just like Xavier Johnson is an excellent football player. I think Emeka Egbuka is a better football player than Xavier Johnson. So I would have liked to maybe see him do some more of that stuff.
They really did like giving Xavier Johnson the ball in the run game. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
like and so he does have some carries as an actual running back, but Xavier Johnson had 23 carries for 155 yards this year. Xavier Johnson got it twice against Michigan. Yeah, why is that not Emeka? What are we doing?
I don't know. Maybe is it a health thing? I'm not sure. Like, did they feel like he couldn't? He looked pretty spry doing it against Minnesota when they gave him those pop passes. So I don't know.
Exceed, meet, or not quite on expectations?
Meet, probably. Like certainly met in his first year as a starter, potentially even exceeded in his first year as a starter. But if you combine that with what happened this year, and again, it's not his fault that he got his ankle rolled up against Maryland, but it did happen. So I don't know if I can go past meet expectations.
The bar is so high. The bar is so ridiculously high.
Yeah.
Gone?
Yeah. My lean is yes. Because people will, I think, hold on to the hope of him not being super productive this year. That's not really what the NFL draft guys on. So I think, yes, he's gone because I think he's going to get a 1st round grade.
Yeah, I think he's still a 1st round pick. And Jackson Smith and Jigba didn't play at all last year. It was still a 1st round pick. Now, maybe Jackson fell 8 spots or something compared to what he might have done if he was completely healthy. But as long as Emeka is like healthy at the combine and able to do what he needs to do, I do think his package of skills with the physicality and the explosiveness is pretty darn good. Okay, I would agree that he's probably gone as well. Now it is TreVeyon Henderson time. This is the number 23 recruit in the class of 2021 in the composite ratings, 1,140 career snaps. That was a boatload as a true freshman in 2021. 3-year starter, 1st team All Big Ten this year, 2nd team All Big Ten in 2021. Again, like a poster boy for the great freshman year, weird sophomore year, and then get it back together when you're healthy as a junior. J.K. Dobbins remains the greatest example of that, because JK, a lot of it was like mental and not just getting hurt in year 2. But what do we make of TreVeyon Henderson?
I think in the end, assuming that we're at the end here, like a career that I think leaves you wanting a little more because the highs were so high. Like when he was healthy, he was just electric, man. Like, and we saw that over the last month. I know we didn't see it in the Michigan game, but no doubt in my mind that a healthy TreVeyon Henderson is one of the more dynamic running backs in college football, and he was just not that for like half of his career because he was hurt so much. So, like, you know, he probably carries that injury-prone moniker, unfortunately for him. But in terms of skill and talent, like as much as anyone, but you know, durability also matters, and I think you have to knock him a little bit for that.
It's hard because, again, this is like the conundrum a little bit with Ryan Day. Ryan Day wants highly skilled players to run this pro-style pass heavy with balance offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's who he recruits. That's what he requires. But then also, he really wants them to be tough. And sometimes I wonder if he would just be happier with less explosiveness and more dudes who are going to hammer it. And I think TreVeyon is an example of this, that he is electric. He is explosive. If he is the guy that you are handing the ball to run between the tackles and you need 4 yards, I'm not sure he's your 4-yard guy. I think he's more like a 2.5-yard guy. And I think there's a part of that drove Ryan Day crazy, even as TreVeyon Henderson was saving Ohio State with a 60-yard touchdown run against Notre Dame. That's just kind of him being electric. That's saving them against Wisconsin with a 30-yard run. That's him being electric. That at times, and again, we talked about, I still believe they were waiting for that. They were counting on that. I don't know that they were doing much to help him get it, but I think they were almost assuming that TreVeyon against Michigan was eventually going to pop something, because that's what TreVeyon does. And when it didn't happen, they were left wanting a little bit offensively. Does this Ohio State offense, would they recruit the next TreVeyon Henderson with this exact skill set? Or do they want a guy who's just listen, TreVeyon didn't play a lot of running back in high school. He's not the world's biggest guy. Do they want or require a bigger, more naturally physical running back?
Probably. And I think their recruiting since then will probably tell you that, right? It's interesting. They took him and Evan Pryor in the same recruiting class, and both guys are, for lack of a better term, like the old school, like third down back kind of in the NFL, right? And not necessarily a workhorse, at least in terms of physical profile. And they've taken some different body types since then, or different types of runners, I think, since then too. But I don't know. I think if they had an opportunity to truly bring in the next guy with TreVeyon's skill set, I don't think they'd pass on him, right? Because there's just too much upside there. But I do think maybe they'd want to balance it out a little better than maybe they were able to balance it out this year with somebody different.
Yeah. It's one of those things like, well, just one Zeke.
Well, yeah, Zeke be great. Yeah.
You just got a 218-pound guy who's also explosive. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Where's that? That's fine.
Bijan Robinson. Yeah.
I know that was one of those. There were some of those, like, when Ohio State thought they were going to get Bijan Robinson and didn't. I definitely interacted with at least a couple of people who are like, oh, no, I'd rather have Trey. It's like, okay, come on. Like, we got to be realistic here. It's not a shot at anybody, but like those dudes who have the entire package. And then it was just hard. And maybe it's more about who his counterbalance is, because Mayan, it's just been a weird 2 years of running back for Ohio State. Like Mayan a year ago, Mayan's not a number one. There are some people who last year, and Trey was battling an injury, and people I think did not give enough credit to the fact that he was trying to play through a foot injury that was preventing him from planting and hitting a hole. And that was very real. But at the time last season, there was some frustration with Ohio State fans who were like, give me Mayan Williams. And it's just like, Mayan Williams is a good player. He is not a number one running back for a championship team. So if you're going to do lightning and thunder, you know, their thunder was like a guy who they flipped from Iowa State and a guy they brought here to be a linebacker and chip train him. So I think like if we feel like maybe the Lightning wasn't quite what they wanted, maybe if their Thunder was a little higher skilled, we'd be like perfect match.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, I think it was, yeah, it just never really synced up, I think. I think Mayan was close. Like a healthy Mayan, I think was like pretty close to being what they would want in terms of a pair with a running back of TreVeyon's skill set. But how many games did Ohio State have where both those guys were 100% like over the last 3 years? Like 4.
Yeah.
It's been hard to sync up.
What they was it last season? They both had 100 rushing yards against Wisconsin, and it was
Yeah.
like that's it. And then it was like poof.
Yeah, and we never saw it again. Yeah.
And now we'll bring in Tony Alford, who will bang his head against his computer screen and join us for 10 minutes. It's been very odd. Exceed expectations, meet or not quite for TreVeyon.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Is it all 3 depending what
yeah,
game it is?
depending on what game it is, right? I think because you can say that, I would probably just land in the middle and say met expectations. Like he did when TreVeyon was like himself. I don't think he had a lot of bad games, right? Maybe you can say this past Michigan game was not his best performance. So if I'm to give him a little bit of credit for that and try not to penalize him so much for being hurt a lot, I would say met expectations.
Think he's gone?
Yeah, yes. This is another guy we've heard like some stuff about too, that I think prior to him coming back and playing so well, I think there was a very real chance and a lot of like real hope in the Woody that he might come back for next year. And I think maybe during that stretch when he came back, he might have played too well to perhaps do that. And also like running back shelf life, man, it's just so short. Like if I'm advising TreVeyon, I'm telling him to go, but I don't know what he's going to do, but my guess is that he's going to go.
Yeah. I almost think he has to go. The combination of the position, the fact that he has had injuries, and he just has not had the easiest run here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he and the program, he and Tony Alford have a very tight relationship, but like generally, I don't think he and the program have been like in lockstep the whole way. And it's just like, it's not that it's bad, but 3 years might be enough. And again, he's a 3-year starter. He has plenty of film. Everyone knows what his healthy film looks like here. So my guess would be that this is probably it for TreVeyon Henderson. I just want to say I did not vote him first team All Big Ten, just because he did miss the time he missed. And it's still like he was very important when he was there, but I thought Kyle Monangai at Rutgers was a really good running back. It was more like a primary part of their offense game after game after game. And I thought Blake Corum was not spectacular, but was like, that's what Michigan did. Right. And so I thought it was a very hard analysis for TreVeyon Henderson, but I was like the upside of TreVeyon, he's the best running back in the Big Ten. But how many games did you get the best of TreVeyon?
Yeah.
To say that that's the first team All Big Ten running back. Because again, what are you voting on? Are you voting on raw talent? Or are you voting on production, what he showed on the field, what he meant to his team? I think I had him third team. So I was a little surprised he got first team.
That's interesting. I would have voted on first team, I think,
okay.
because I think his ceiling is the best running back in the Big Ten. And
it is.
Blake Corum was scored a bunch of touchdowns, but wasn't super productive. Scored a lot of 5-yard touchdowns. I think it was just what do you make of that?
Yeah. Interesting conversation about what you value. All right. Next up is Jack Sawyer, who came on this year. Number 5 overall recruit down the road in Pickerington. To find a 5-star like that, boy, that's a nice little thing for Ohio State to have. 1,051 career snaps, really established himself this year. Really this 1 year as a starter, made second team All Big Ten. I thought that was appropriate. I think I had him third team because it's one of those things sometimes. It's like there's good players in the Big Ten. I don't know what to tell you. And it's like there's other guys besides just the Ohio State players, but I do think he deserved to be All Big Ten this year. Another guy with a weird career because Jim Knowles tried to make him something last year that he just wasn't. What do you think of Jack Sawyer? Yeah,
that they kind of screwed him up last year. I think is my overwhelming thought about Jack Sawyer's time here. And then that he had to knock off the little bit of rust earlier this year because of that. But I think on the backstretch of the season, you saw the vision for what Jack Sawyer, I think, always was supposed to be here. So
what is that? What is that?
Really good, I think really good, solid, stout run defender, it turns out. And probably a little bit more, I don't know. Does he have more pass rush stuff than JT? Maybe not. I could go back and forth on that, but similar mold to JT, I think. More about strength at the point of attack than like crazy bend and crazy get off and like going to throw 50 different moves at you, but just like a solid, hard to block defensive end that you need to plan around because he can be disruptive in a few different areas.
So, do you think he's back? I think it would be really good for Ohio State if he was back, because I could see some version of what they had in 2022 with Jack Sawyer as like the old guy in the Zach Harrison role, and Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson as the younger guys like JT and Jack were last year. And you kind of do like a 3-man rotation there where Jack's the older guy and he gets more snaps than anybody else. But if Jack's kind of laying it down as like, I'm going to do everything right, I'm going to be sturdy against the run, you can let Kenyatta let it rip as a pass rusher on the other side. Caden Curry's a very good player. I would be very intrigued by that as your top 3 defensive ends in 2024. And if he's gone, then I think maybe they're a little short.
If he's gone, I think they need to look at the transfer portal for defensive linemen. Like combination of you're not a slam dunk first round pick, but I think you could eventually be one. You're a local guy, which I actually think like helps with the NIL stuff and maybe puts a little more money in your pocket than it would otherwise. And maybe if you believe like, man, the second half of this year was really good, I think I'll put it together. What might that look like next year if I put it together for the course of a whole season? I think that could get him there. So I'm on the fence with him. I think at the moment I would lean back, but it's soft, but I could see it.
He's the first Ohio guy that we've hit on this list. Certainly possible that 3 straight Michigan losses sticks in his craw a little more than guys who did not grow up in Ohio. And does Jack Sawyer, again, it's just not the thing. It's not the thing you come back for most of the time, but it's one of the factors in the consideration. Does Jack Sawyer want to leave without ever beating Michigan? You know, I'm not saying that Denzel Burke and JT Tuimoloau don't care about that, but when you grow up in Arizona and Washington, it's not the same thing as growing up walking distance from Ohio Stadium. So I would say, again, circumstantial evidence, I would say back.
Yeah.
We'll put it down. I'm putting an S for stay on my.
Let's do it.
In my notebook.
Let's do it.
Exceeded, meet, or not quite on expectations so far?
I think meet. I don't know. The second year was so wonky that maybe it's not quite.
But I almost feel like it's not his fault. So yeah. I want to lean meet because it's not his fault that they tried something with him in year 2 that completely did not work.
Yeah, it wasn't only the positional stuff. It was also like making him 270 pounds, I think was also a mistake.
Yeah. So again, what we're talking about is the jack position, like the stand-up rush end that they tried to use. Jack, is that dead, by the way? We have not talked about that in a very long time.
I think it's dead as long as Larry Johnson's here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's another podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that today. Okay. So Jack Sawyer, we're going to say stay and meet, which I think is probably going to be right. Next up is Tyleik Williams, your guy. I really thought people overrated him as a freshman because he like had 190 snaps in garbage time and had a PFF grade that was high, and people were like, freshman All-American. I was like, okay. And then last year it's kind of like, okay, like it's in a rotation, whatever. I did not see this coming. He was great this year. Did you see this coming?
I mean, he's always been my guy, as you said. So like I guess I would say yes. Like I was hopeful this was going to come. I'll say this, like I was definitely one of the people who bought in, to the hype as a freshman and was probably wrong about that. And then I did not think he played very well as a sophomore. Like certainly didn't maximize the snaps that were given to him. Could Ohio State have played him more? Probably. Did he earn it? I don't know if that's necessarily true. I thought he was great this year. So this is what he was this year, was kind of what I always envisioned him being, but I wouldn't say he's been that for all 3 years he's been here.
Number 166 recruit in the class of 2021, 1,020 career snaps. So most of them this year. He played a lot. He played a lot this year, given Ohio State's typical stance of rotating defensive linemen, and that it felt like the conversation around him his first 2 years was, is he in the shape he needs to be in to play more? And then they just like put him on the field and let it rip this year.
Yeah, I think sometimes with athletes like Tyleik, there is too much of a slant towards like, well, look at him. He's 330 pounds. He can't possibly play that much. And like some guys are just special freak athletes and can play that much when they are that big. And maybe they should have let him rip a little more prior to this year, because I do think some of that motor stuff was a little bit overblown.
586 snaps this year, fourth on the defense, behind Davis Igbinosun, JT Tuimoloau, and Tommy Eichenberg. It's remarkable. This dude deserves a ton of credit for what he did to get himself ready for this season and for producing at the level that he produced this year. I voted him first team All Big Ten. I voted JT on my ballot. Again, it's defensive tackles and defensive ends mixed. You have to vote for 12 defensive linemen, and you just put them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not like you put first team, second team, third team. You just rank them 1 through 12. I had Tyleek fourth, and I had JT fifth. So that's like Tyleek barely on first team, JT barely on second team. But I just thought, do you think he was the most impactful Ohio State defensive lineman this year?
Yeah, I don't think it's close. Yeah.
Okay. So you like my vote? I try to vote how you would think.
I do like your vote. Yeah, I would have had him up there. Johnny Newton ahead of him, and then who else?
I put one of the Michigan defensive tackles up there, but I can't remember which one. And then I had Chop Robinson also on first team.
Okay.
So I think I had Newton 1, Chop Robinson 2 were my top 2 guys.
I think for as much as I praise and have praised Michigan's defensive tackles this year, I think that Tyleek Williams was the second best tackle in the Big Ten behind Johnny Newton.
Yep. Yeah. All right. So number 166 recruit. Again, he's not a top 100. He's not a 5-star, but a very high recruit. Exceed, meet, or not quite on expectations?
I would say maybe slightly exceed because of just how good this year was. Again, like he was pretty, I think, consistently impactful. I don't know. Yeah. Dominant might be too strong of a word, but certainly had dominant moments. But I think his run of play this year gets me to exceed.
I think I agree with that. Like slightly exceed.
Yeah.
Stay or go?
Go. I don't think he's back next year.
Too hot.
Too hot.
Too hot. Too much juice. Too much of what the NFL wants. When you're a guy with size on the interior defensive line who can also get after the passer, that is some pixie dust, baby.
By the way, our friend Dane Brugler at The Athletic had his first 2024 mock draft out on Wednesday, and he does like all the first rounders, and then he does the teams that don't have a first round pick. So the Browns don't have a first round pick. But the second round pick, he has Tyleek Williams going to Cleveland.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dane loves the Buckeyes. Dane had to hold himself back from putting Tyleek 12th in the first round. Dane was like, Jaden Daniels or Tyleek Williams at 7. I'm not sure. So we love Dane. He's great at what he does. He just happens to be from Youngstown. He's got a little Buckeye juice. He's really good. Like Dane's one of those things. Like I was talking to Dane back when Dane was working for like websites that nobody heard of, and I'm like, I'm going to call this guy to talk about the draft. And now he's Dane Brugler. It's because he's great, because he works his butt off year round. I would recommend following his work at The Athletic and with the gigantic draft preview he puts out, because Ohio State's going to have a lot of interesting guys in this draft. And Marv's going to be right at the top of it, but they are going to be like super interesting in rounds 2 through 4.
Yeah.
Where it's like, is this guy going to be the 38th pick or the 71st pick? And it really matters where you land in there. All right. So next after Tyleek, 9th up on our list is Kyle McCord. He's the starting quarterback. He was the number 28 recruit in the class of 2021. He has 865 career snaps, all of them this year because Ohio State does not play their backup quarterbacks. 1-year starter, 3,170 passing yards this year, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And I don't know if Ohio State fans would be surprised by this. You are doing your all Big Ten ballot, and it's like, he's third. He's the third best quarterback in the Big Ten. So, like, did he have a great year? No. I don't even know who the challenger is, because J.J. McCarthy's first. I guess Talia Tagovailoa is second, but even that's like, well, I don't know. If like Ohio State could trade Kyle, go back before the Michigan and be like, you can trade for Talia right now, or you can roll with Kyle. I think you roll with Kyle, right?
I would roll with Kyle. Yeah.
So it's one of those things. So he's one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten, but what do we think, Landis?
Yeah. We think a lot.
We're not going to do it all here.
Yeah.
So this is just brushing over it.
I would say, like, very high expectations at this position at Ohio State. Like damn near impossible to me. I think without how good the position has been here. So that is an uphill climb for anybody, not just Kyle. With that said, that definitely left something to be desired this year with his play. I just think, like, in terms of expected readiness from a guy who, to your point, has not played a ton, but was still in his third year in the system, or was entering his third year in the system, had been here marinating in this offense for 2 years. Didn't come out of the blocks the way I thought he might, and then I don't know how much progression I saw over the course of the season.
Not a straight line. Not a straight line of like getting better, getting better. If he plays great against Michigan, they win. If he doesn't make one crucial mistake, they might win. It's hard to evaluate a guy on one play, but I felt like I think a lot of people would probably agree, like that first interception, that didn't feel, where did that come from? That was actually the exact thing that anybody who roots for Ohio State would have been fearing going into the game. And then it happened.
Yeah, I think that first quarter generally was that, right? That the pick stands out because it was such an egregious mistake and obviously costly in the final tally. But he had been a bad first quarter quarterback all year, and you would hope that he would have knocked that out of himself by the end of the year. And aside from the Michigan State game, he never really did, and it showed up against Michigan.
Yeah, and it felt like an early miss to Marv helped lead to forcing it on the pick, and it's just like he did miss a couple throws. Again, we covered this on the Giant Kyle McCord show that we did. He was, according to the 247 composite rankings in his class, he was the number 6 quarterback. Quinn Ewers was number 1. Caleb Williams with the Heisman was number 2. J.J. McCarthy was number 5. Drake May at North Carolina, who's going to be a top 5 pick in this draft, was number 9. That's not everybody hits. Jackson Dart, who put up huge numbers at Ole Miss this year after transferring from USC, was number 10. It's not Jalen Milroe, who is made the game-winning play for Alabama in the Iron Bowl, was number 13. So they didn't all hit, but there are guys in his class who started this year and played at a higher level than Kyle McCord did. So I think it's not quite on the expectations.
Yeah, I think it has to be. Again, high bar, but that's what you sign up for when you come to play quarterback at Ohio State. So yeah, I think it's not met.
And there's certainly there was conversation when they were going into this quarterback battle, or even like a year ago when you were thinking about the pecking order in the quarterback room, which is just a fun thing to think about. Mm-hmm. And it never goes as you think it's going to go. But it's fun to think about, well, this guy's going to start this year, and this guy's going to start this year. Then if this guy starts 2 years, then this guy will be ready to start. And then it never works out. But certainly some people thought Kyle McCord wins the job this season, starts 1 year, and goes on the Dwayne Haskins model. Was that not a line of thinking going into this year?
Yeah, I think there was a line of thinking. I think that was kind of ideal scenario for Ohio State in terms of just managing the room moving forward, but I don't think that's going to happen now.
Yeah, so stay,
yeah,
and see what happens.
And we'll see what happens. Yeah,
and we'll see what happens, which is again not what we're going to do right this very second. Next up is a very interesting guy. It's Jordan Hancock, who should have made all Big Ten this year and didn't. Number 73 recruit in the class of 2021. They flipped him from Clemson. It was a big deal. It was like Kerry Combs is getting this corner back room back in order when he got Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson as top 100 guys at the cornerback position. 675 career snaps, almost all of them this year, because hamstring injuries basically blew up his first 2 seasons as a Buckeye. I just thought like a really high level player, did not make all Big Ten. I voted him second team all Big Ten this year. And I think you and Austin covered that, not happy that he was not recognized.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised to see that. I don't really know how that happens. He was probably one of Ohio State's 4 best defensive players this year. Tyleek, Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke, JT or Jack, maybe. Yeah.
So just the versatility of being able to play outside corner, be able to play slot corner, to have the physicality, I think, to play the run as slot corner. Jim Knowles really liked him. it is one of those things, like, you take him off this team. If he had gotten hurt this year, they really would have been, they would have had some trouble, because like this, he had a certain skill set that like nobody else on the team had, where you were just comfortable sliding him inside. And he didn't have like the Marshawn Lattimore kind of season, where Marshawn had 2 seasons that were blown up by injuries, then was an All-American, and then was the defensive rookie of the year in the NFL. But basically you got 1 good year out of Marshawn Lattimore. I think they're going to get 1 good year out of Jordan Hancock, which is going to stink.
Yeah.
It's just going to stink.
It really is. I think we're there too. I want to read something. So this is from when he committed to, or flipped, I guess I should say, from Clemson to Ohio State. Watching him perform at the highest level of Georgia high school football is reminiscent of watching Shaun Wade when he was in high school in Florida. That's in every sense, from frame, playing speed, tenacity, and feel for the game. Hancock projects as a big physical corner who could potentially play outside or inside at nickel, similar to Wade. That was from Bill Landis on July 19th, 2020.
My favorite recruiting analyst. Can we read do you have your evaluation of Tate Martell when he committed to Ohio State?
It's taped on my wall back here. Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
You read it when you're right. You
That's
burn
right.
it when you're wrong.
That's right. Yeah, he like, the idea of Jordan Hancock came to fruition this year, and like we heard all about it coming into last year, and it just, the hamstring injury never let him get there. And who knows, but it would have looked quite like this. I don't know. But this is always what they expected him to be, and possibly even something more, because this is not the defense that he was recruited into. So I think it might have worked out for him too, that he ended up in a scheme that helped him even further kind of accentuate his diverse skill set. And he was awesome, and I don't think he's back next year.
31 snaps, 103 snaps, 541 snaps. That's his career arc. And this could be one of those guys that like you're watching in the NFL for 7 or 8 years and be like, man, it would have been nice for Ohio State if he had been healthy enough to contribute a little bit more.
Yep.
So we both think he's gone exceed expectations, meet, or not quite.
I would say meet, only because he just has the 1 year, and like the 1 year I think was what people envisioned for him, if he, as long as he was healthy enough to play. So I would maybe meet with a slight lean toward exceed, maybe.
Because it is like, again, right? That really was a thing. Hancock and Johnson were like, we're getting the Ohio State cornerback room back to what it's supposed to be. And also, by the way, Denzel Burke's here too. And then it was like, oh, wait, Denzel Burke. Because Denzel Burke was here in the spring. The other 2 guys were not. And Denzel Burke showed up ready to work and showing people that he was not afraid of anything. And so that was such a big deal. But that Hancock got here just because of injuries. He was a not quite. And now this is what you, I think, expected. And it's just, he's just probably too talented.
Yeah, I think he's maybe a lesser version now, but like I think I've said this before. I don't know if I've said it on this show. Like, the guy in the draft last year that I like the most on the defensive side, and I'm not alone in this, is like Brian Branch from Alabama. And I think that's what Jordan Hancock is.
That's pretty good. People love Brian Branch.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is Mike Hall Jr., number 53 overall recruit in the class of 2021, 669 career snaps. Another guy that you would just like to see more of, but like kind of a 2-year starter, again, like a 2-year primary contributor at the very least. 3rd team All Big Ten each of the last 2 years. Snaps for Mike Hall, 35 as a freshman. It's like he redshirted, right? I mean, he was just like not going to play, which is fine. 266 last year when everybody, I think, wanted him to play more. And there's just like some physical stuff that it felt like, why isn't Larry Johnson playing him? And it's like, okay, well, he's kind of dealing with some stuff. 368 snaps this year, which again is like he had some other injury stuff. And it's just like, man, you would like to see more Mike Hall. I mean, again, Tyleik Williams played 200 more snaps than Mike Hall this year. And Mike Hall made the most impactful play that an Ohio State defensive lineman made in the Michigan game. What do you think of Mike Hall?
I think it's a similar vibe to TreVeyon Henderson, right? Like the flashes were so bright. Like I thought Mike Hall was going to be an All-American this year. That's how good I think he looked when he was right. But just like not physically there, I think enough to ever really meet that ceiling, or certainly exceed it. So get all the talent in the world, I think. Incredible pass rusher from the interior. I think probably better against the run than people want to give him credit for. And he was very good against Michigan. I thought the Michigan game actually might have been the best game of his career. So I think a player that has some special traits that maybe just didn't have a large enough body of work for that to show as consistently as Ohio State fans wanted it to.
So what's he going to do? Think he's back or no?
No, I think he's going to go. I think he's going to test like a maniac, and his good film is so good that teams are going to fall in love with him.
Man, what's going on? Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah,
that's a tough one. Exceed, meet, or not quite on expectations?
I think I would say meet.
I mean, it's a borderline, like not borderline 5-star, but almost like a top 50 national player.
Yeah, I think, and some services had him, if not a 5-star, like pretty close to it. So yeah, I could probably be talked into not quite because. And I think
partly like, I feel like he is more circumstances. Like maybe he wasn't as good against the run consistently, and I think that affected his playing time last year, right? But it felt like more often than not, when he was on the field, he mattered. But it's just that he's last of these 11 guys we've listed in career snaps. Like he played the least, but still had a huge impact. I think it's not quite just on volume, which is maybe if he had been, I don't know, a more well-rounded player, maybe Larry Johnson would have played him more, but I feel like a lot of it is not his fault. And it was just like, man, play this guy 50 snaps a game and what would have happened?
Yeah. And which I guess is, that's like the TreVeyon Henderson complex, I think, right? It's unfortunate. It's like a little bit of bad luck, I suppose. And I think he could very well end up being a guy who like tears it up in the NFL, and Ohio State fans just kick themselves wondering what could have been when he was here.
Yeah, man. Is there going to be like kind of a lot of kicking about this class in various ways? We just ran through a list of 11 remarkable players, and we'll do Jesse Mirco here in a second. But I do feel like whether it's just team context primarily, or injuries, or time on the field, or whatever, that there are going to be some what could have been, even with how good these guys are.
Yeah, I think you're going to. Yeah, I think you're going to see a decent amount of that with this class. Yes.
All right, I'm trying to count stuff up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. Last guy is Jesse Mirco. We got to talk about punters. It used to be fun to talk about punters at Ohio State, because I think if we ever do Bill and Doug's list of whatever favorite Buckeye players in the time they covered him, I think we both have Cam Johnston on our list of the top 10. So we're inclined to enjoy Australian Ohio State punters, but it's not quite as fun right now.
Doesn't quite hit the same way with Jesse Mirco. Just like a really, I think, inconsistent punter. Good at the like flipping it from the 40 to like pin a team inside its 5. Not so much at like booming it when you need to and flipping the field when you need to. That was the thing about Cam Johnson, is like he could do it all, man. He was a special athlete, that guy.
And that probably raised our expectations too high. But like Ohio State got out punted in the Michigan game.
They sure did. Yeah, absolutely.
So like, I don't know, that feels like a time when you would really want that. So I don't know. 122 career punts. He's been punting since he got here. 42.6 yard average this year. I always like when it's like, how do you make a recruiting rating for a punter? But somewhere it said 1,990 in that class. They they run through kickers. They've had kind of weird things happen with their recruited kicker, which has led them, I think, multiple times in the last like 8 years to wind up in the portal and with walk-ons and with weird stuff happening. But the punters, they kind of just say, come here for 5 years and be the punter, right? Isn't that like Cam Johnston was the punter the whole time he was here, and then Drew Crispin was the punter the whole time he was here. Now Jesse Mirco is the punter the whole time he's here. He's been the punter for 3 years. I'm not 1,000% sure he should be the punter next year.
I'm at the point where I don't think he should be. I don't know. Do they have one coming in? I don't know if they have one coming in. I can't remember.
But fine, go find one.
Go find one. Yeah.
Have competition.
It is weird juxtapose the kicker, because kicker, like, yeah, They recruited a scholarship kicker in Jake Seibert, who like kicked in a national championship and then never kicked again. And then brought in Parker Lewis from USC, who I don't like. Did he ever play? I don't think he ever played here.
Yeah.
And then it was like, we got this walk on from ING Academy. He's going to kick for us.
So I don't know. Like it's not Cam Johnston, which is hard, but but it's also not Drew Chrisman. Drew Chrisman was better than this.
Drew Chrisman was pretty good. Yeah. No, it's just not. It's not good enough, I don't think, at the punter position at the moment.
He's not an NFL punter. Drew Chrisman has been an NFL punter. Cam Johnston is absolutely an NFL punter. Yeah. So I don't think it's unreasonable for that to be like, is your punter NFL quality at a place like Ohio State?
Yeah, and at the moment he's not. Yeah.
All right, so he's the 12th guy, but let's talk about Josh Simmons very quickly was not in the recruiting class. So Jesse Mirko. Maybe back. Who would? I don't know. He's not going anywhere unless he goes back to Australia, which is fine. He's just an older guy. It's just a thing. I don't know. So many teams are in on the Australian punter thing, but not every punter in the world is an Australian punter. Whatever. So Josh Simmons is a third-year guy. He will be back next year as a returning starter. I guess he'll be the left tackle again. Like, do you think he's definitely the left tackle again, or do you think like there could be maybe you kick Fryer into guard, you move Josh Simmons to right tackle, you play Luke Montgomery at left tackle or something? I don't know. Do you think, oh, no. You are developing Josh Simmons to be like the 3-year starter at left tackle for Ohio State?
I guess I would say that he is a tackle next year.
Okay.
Maybe there's some shuffling, but I think he is a starting tackle next year.
Okay. So we're not doing him the same way because it's not about what he was coming in, because he didn't come in as part of this recruiting class. So in the end, again, we've talked about there are 12 guys in that recruiting class who wound up being primary guys on this team. That includes Mirko. On our list, but we're only really doing the 11 because we're not doing the punter for that. 8 gone, 3 stay by our estimation. How do you feel about that for the Fighting Buckeyes?
It feels right. That's kind of in line with, I think, where we were coming into the season. Or we thought this was going to be a draft class that got into the double digits, and it only gets there if a large chunk of this 2021 class leaves. So I think that's probably going to be close to accurate, I think.
Yeah. Is that just the way it is? Is that good, bad, indifferent? This is just going to be a very different team next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's what happens when you recruit a class that was as good as this one, right? A lot of good individual talents that played well throughout their Ohio State careers. Even if, our assessment of people who watch Ohio State every day is like maybe some of these guys didn't quite match what the expectations are. That's not what determines value for the NFL draft. And I think there's a lot of really good tape out there for the NFL to evaluate from this class. So I think it's certainly more than likely that a large chunk of them leave, and it's just something you have to prepare for at Ohio State. So they better hope they have class of 2022 guys ready to step up to fill that void.
Yeah. All right. Quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up this class one more time and then get into some what you're watching, what you're eating, what you're thinking. We'll do that next on Kings of Columbus. All right. So wrapping up this 2021 recruiting class, Landis, on our expectations meter, we had 3 guys that we said exceeded expectations. That was Denzel Burke, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Tyleik Williams. We had 5 who met it and 3 who were not quite. So again, that's talking about like the 10-80-10. We're at 3-5-3. So, right. I think you want you want to make sure that your bad end is not higher than your good end. And so with this class, that is absolutely no doubt about it. There is far more good than fell short.
Mm-hmm.
So will we remember this class as a class? Like, I think at times in my career covering Ohio State, again, I've been very infatuated about thinking about classes. I don't know if it's the transfer portal. I don't know if it's my old age. I don't know if it's, I don't know what it is, but just, I have not thought about this group as much. Even though back on my old show, like when they came in, we were doing, will Ohio State be the greatest team in college football history based off this 2023 recruiting class? So that part of it, like as we think about how this group will be remembered, I guess maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we do think about it as a class, because it felt like when this group came in that like the sky was the limit. They were shooting for the moon with this group, right? Especially when Ewers was tied into it. But even without that, it felt like maybe this group had a chance to represent like the best Ohio State team we'd ever seen. Is that wrong?
No, I don't think that's wrong. I wonder, like, how much do you think maybe the redshirt rule might change the perception of that? Because like the classes previous where I think you did think about them more as a group, they couldn't like play sporadically. It was just sort of like they either sort of like all waited and then played as redshirt freshmen, or maybe enough of them were rocking and rolling as true freshmen where you took notice of it. Like this group, like a couple of guys played big roles as true freshmen. Some others like played their 4 games and kind of disappeared. And then like they didn't all kind of arrive on similar wavelengths. So I think that's maybe why this class feels a little different. It's like the receivers were there, sophomores, but like Kyle McCord had to join them as a junior. And like JT Tuimoloau played a bunch as a freshman, but like Mike Hall, Tyleek Williams, and Jack Sawyer had to like wait another year to get on that level too. So maybe that's part of it, the way why we don't think about the collective as much, because it was a little bit of a hodgepodge in terms of timelines for people. Even like Denzel Burke, like exploding onto the scene while the 2 more highly ranked guys had to wait. And Jordan Hancock takes 2 more years to be a part of the defense. So it was a little weird in that way. So I don't know that Ohio State fans might look back at, boy, that 2021 class the same way. Certainly not the 13 class, because the 13 class won a national title, but even like the 17 class, I think you just kind of remember that collective a little more than you will this one.
And I guess the thing that you maybe thought was going to happen is that I thought there maybe were going to be multiple guys in this class who were going to be like super duper stars.
Yep.
That if you thought, okay, like Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson, they're going to be as good as any corners we've seen at Ohio State. And J.T. Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are both top 10 national recruits. They are going to be on the Bosa Young level. And TreVeyon Henderson is going to be a first-team All-American running back. And Emeka Buka is going to be the best receiver in the country. Marv's turned out to be that instead. But like when you think about the 2013 class and you think about Joey Bosa, Ezekiel Elliott, JT Barrett, who wound up being like the winningest quarterback in Ohio State history, and then maybe like Von Bell, let's say, right?
Yeah,
like
Darren Lee was in that class too, right?
And like Darren Lee was more like he was a 2-year like All-American. Like there's so many all Big Ten level guys. How many All-American level guys are in this 2021 class? Definitely Marv. But that's it. I don't know that there's anybody else that you like. There's not that you would argue. TreVeyon Henderson's not the best running back in the country. JT Tuimoloau is not the best defensive end in the country.
Right.
Right. Like there's no. Whereas in 13, you had like 3 or 4 real headliners, but especially Ezekiel Elliott and Joey Bosa. 2017, you had Chase Young, best defensive end in the country. You had Jeff Okudah, arguably best corner in the country. You had J.K. Dobbins, 2,000-yard rusher, arguably best running back in the country. Like you had real like headline dudes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if this group was going to lead a national championship surge, and they still have a slim chance of getting there, I think you needed a couple more guys to be like first team All-American level of like, there's nobody better than that guy in the country at what he does. And the only guy who hit that was Marvin. Yeah.
No one, I don't really think anyone came close to that other than Marvin in this group. I think like Jordan Hancock could be on that path if he were to come back and play next year, but like we don't think he's going to. And maybe Jack Sawyer will be if he comes back and plays next year, although I have my doubts about that. Still be very good. Yeah, like I thought Mike Hall might get there this year if he played the workload that Tyleek Williams ended up playing. Certainly thought Donovan Jackson had that kind of upside when he came out as a potential All-American guard. And yeah, that is I think a reasonable letdown for this group, right? A class that ends up with 6 5-star prospects and a bunch of guys in the top 100. You would expect more than one of them to hit in the way that Marvin did.
And Denzel Burke might be close. I think Denzel Burke could make an All-American team. I don't think that's impossible. And
yeah,
he might be underrated nationally in some ways. But so maybe 1.5. But so it's hard. But that's the expectation level here.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, this was the highest overall player rating, but they didn't hit what the 13 class, and they didn't hit what the 17 class. Like they didn't hit quite in an individual way, or it looks like they're not going to make the playoff, and they didn't beat Michigan.
Yep. And the I don't know, like How many first round picks are going to be in this draft class?
Yeah.
Marvin and JT,
maybe Emeka.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is still a lot, but it's not going to be 5 like they
Right.
had, not just in the class, but collectively coming out in the 2016 draft. So, I mean, it's hard, but that's the air we were talking about. As good as you've ever seen it at Ohio State, and it winds up just being a little bit short. And I do believe, like, it's not to blame, but it's hard to be like an all-time. We're not talking about national titles, but it's hard to be an all-time Ohio State legend if you haven't beaten Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you're not respected. It doesn't mean that you're not great. But that is, again, like before the game, I was not like, Emeka and JT and Marvin, Kyle and TreVeyon have to beat Michigan. But if they leave not having done it, it's part of their resume that I think is part of the discussion whenever you talk about great all-time Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's why we talked so much about it last week with that group. Like, and I do think that resonates with these players. I just don't know, like, I don't know if it resonates enough to push many of them back to rectify it, because there's a lot of money on the table.
There is. Okay, so that will wrap up our full evaluation of the 2021 Ohio State recruiting class, which means we are ready, because we skipped it last week because there's no nonsense during Michigan week, but now we're back to a little bit of nonsense. What you watching, what you eating, what you thinking next on Kings of Columbus. Time again for what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking here on Kings of Columbus. And I'll start with what I was watching, Landis. And I have self-awareness about this. And I'm a 50-year-old man. But I think people know that I like Disney. But I do feel a bit odd coming on here as a 50-year-old man and complaining that I thought the new Disney cartoon sucked. But I did. I thought it was terrible. And then there's like a movie review show that I listened to where the guy is I think he's good, and I think he's often like very discriminating about movies. And then he took like his 2-year-old daughter to this movie. It was the first movie they ever went to. And he was like, I don't care about movie criticism anymore. I just had a magical time. And I was like, well, now you're soft because I still care. And this one was terrible. So I don't know. Is it fair? Does it make sense for a 50-year-old man to criticize a Disney cartoon when every 5-year-old who saw it would be like, I like the singing? And I'm like, I thought the lyrics to the songs were terrible. And I thought that they had a close-up of the sorcerer's fingers, and I thought they looked fat and juicy, and it was terrible animation. Do I sound like a lunatic to come on here and give my list of the 14 things I thought were wrong with Wish?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I respect it. I respect your opinion. But yeah, I don't, I'm gonna guess that you weren't the intended audience for Wish.
The hard thing is that often, like, you are, because there's a little bit of sophistication in the story, or like an inside joke for the parents or whatever. And this just felt like, I thought it felt like a knockoff of a Disney movie, that like another animation studio was like, make it about like put it in a castle and we're good. And some cheesy songs. So I guess I would say, if you're not a child, don't go see it because it's not very good.
Is it a Pixar thing?
No, it's not. It's like hand-drawn animation. I guess it was supposed to be hand-drawn the whole way, and then they went and did a little bit of computer stuff at the end, but it's much more along the lines of like traditional hand-drawn animation, not computerized. So I just thought it was meh. So, and my family, none of us enjoyed it. We were like making fun of it the whole time. Like, compared to like Frozen, it's just like it's 1/100th as good as Frozen. So, you planning to go see it? Does George want to go see Wish?
Not yet. I'm a little illiterate anymore on the Disney animated stuff. I don't know. I think the last one I saw was Inside Out, and there's been quite a bit since then.
Oh, there have been. They're bringing out Inside Out too, though. We're very excited for that.
Oh, I don't need that. That movie made me cry. I don't need to watch another one.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Disney movies should make you cry.
Oh, I don't like that one. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. You got any adult things that you've been watching?
I was actually wondering if I could just take this opportunity to solicit suggestions, because I don't have any. It's hard. I don't know if you find, like, it's hard for me, and I guess it's doubly hard now because we have a almost 1-year-old at home. But to find time to like watch new things during football season. like go to the movies, yes, but like get into a new series of anything, it's just a little bit difficult. And now that the season's not over, but we're getting close to that time, I want to watch some stuff, and I'm pretty far behind on just about everything. I'm sure there's worthwhile like Netflix and Hulu series that came out 6 years ago that I'm unfamiliar with that I should be watching. So I'm trying to find some new ones. Like I want to watch the For All Mankind, right? Is the one that you've mentioned. Like that interests me. What was the one that was on Apple? Severance. Did you watch Severance? Like I want to watch that. I've never seen it. I don't know anything about it other than people thought it was good. So I'm in that mode now. I'm in that mode where I'm looking for new stuff. So if anyone has suggestions, please send them to me.
How should they send them to you?
Just tweet them at me.
Tweet them at you. Okay. There's this is an old one. I think it's on, now I'm looking up. It's like one of these things, again, when you're old, it's like, it's on one of those streaming services. I can't remember which one, but I think it was Netflix. It came and went several years ago. It was on Netflix. It came out in 2019. And it only lasted one season. It's only 8 episodes. And it's Paul Rudd with a clone of himself, like he clones himself. And so it's 2 Paul Rudds. So nice. The main thing is, I think Paul Rudd is like a nice, easy. It's like if Paul Rudd's in a thing, it's like, I can watch Paul Rudd, and like I don't have to think very much, So I think as you're easing out of football season, you don't necessarily want to dive in all the way on too much of the homework TV. Yeah. So it's called Living with Yourself. It's on Netflix, and it's just a nice, easy breezy 8 episodes of 2 Paul Rudds.
I wanted to watch. I've never seen any of them, and they intrigue me, like the John Wick movies.
Oh,
and they're on Peacock, and on Tuesday night I was like, I'm gonna watch one, and then I like sat down and turned on the TV and then fell asleep before I even got the chance to put it on. So
the soothing tones of John Wick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Peacock hooked you in. Peacock's like, got to get Peacock to watch Ohio State Rutgers, and you're like, okay, I'll watch John Wick now.
Yeah, I think I already had it because like you needed now to watch The Office. Like if you were the person who just like every time you turned on Netflix to watch something new, you just watch The Office instead. I'm that person, and now you need Peacock to do that. So
yeah. Okay. So what are you eating, Landis?
It's all I've been thinking about during the show. Because right before I scarfed down half of a sandwich from Brown Bag Deli. It's over in German Village where I go to get my haircut. So I try to go get lunch there or Katzinger's Deli when I'm in that part of town. So I went and got a brisket sandwich from Brown Bag Deli, which was their special of the day. It's not something they have all the time, but they have it fairly regularly. And I'm always a little hesitant to try it because I'm not really going to Brown Bag for like a barbecue sandwich, but it's not really a barbecue sandwich. It's like brisket on a ciabatta with like some red onion and some kind of like aioli deal that was very good, but just an excellent sandwich. And I had half of it before we started here, and I'm excited to eat the other half as soon as we're done.
Look at that little reward for the pod.
That's
for
right.
The show. That's very strategic by you.
Yeah, I consider eating it during the show, but I don't think anyone wants to watch that or hear that.
So like back in the day, before we were like leaning into YouTube, when you're just doing podcasts, you can do anything you want on podcast. You don't have to comb your hair.
Eat 100 chicken nuggets.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're realizing that there may be people actually viewing you while you do it, and your whole world changes. So, they're definitely back in the old days. We definitely would sometimes get reviews of like, we could hear you eating. Please stop. And it was like, I was bad on the mute button there.
Yeah. There's only so many hours in the day. What are we supposed to do? Sometimes you got to eat
do long shows.
Yeah.
It's nourishment. I don't normally go 90 minutes without eating. So it's hard on this show. My eating thing is just, I think, so we went out for dinner on Thanksgiving Day because it was just the 4 of us in the nuclear family with my daughter home from college. And I think you were saying that it was just going to be you, the big 3, doing your thing. And it's just one of these things. If you aren't from Ohio and you don't have family right around you, the fact that Thanksgiving week is Ohio State, Michigan week, it's just like you can't leave, and it's not that great to invite people into your home because it's like it's Ohio State, Michigan week. Bill and Doug are maniacs, so they're not going to be functional human beings other than maybe for like the 90 minutes while you're eating Thanksgiving dinner. So the result is we went out to dinner, and then like there's no Thanksgiving leftovers. So it's just one of those of like, it was very nice to go out. Nobody had the burden of cooking, and nobody, I'm a terrible cook. I have no interest in cooking. And so we went out to a very nice restaurant. We had gigantic plates of Thanksgiving food, but then that kind of was it. And it almost makes me want to like now go recreate a dinner because like leftovers are practically the whole reason for Thanksgiving. Did you have leftovers from yours?
Did we have? No, we ended up eating all the stuffing.
Yeah.
And then we got like a smaller turkey breast, so we kind of ended up eating like most of it to the point where it wasn't worth saving what was left over. So I had a similar experience. Now you're making me wonder, like, should there be a fast casual restaurant that just sells Thanksgiving leftovers?
Oh my God. Leftovers? If you just had a restaurant called Leftovers,
yeah,
and you just slid through and they would just, because you could fast casual that. Why isn't there a fast casual Thanksgiving themed restaurant? You can get everything else in the world fast casual: Italian, Mexican, Mediterranean, everything else. Turkey is like, what do you want? Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, vegetables, corn, cranberry sauce. Like, what do you want? And you can just wrap it up and put it in a burrito. Who cares?
Yeah.
Did you just is that $1 million idea that you just gave away?
Well, places do that like seasonally, right? You can go to like, I know we don't have Wawa's here yet, but they have their Thanksgiving sandwich called the Gobbler, and Mad Mex, the Mexican joint, which I think maybe there's still one here, has the Gobblerito, which is what you just described. I don't think Chipotle does it, but Chipotle should. But yeah, I think there's enough people that want Thanksgiving food that you could sustain a business if you sell it year round.
Because that's a separate thing. It's not ethnic. It's not like American food or Mexican food or Italian food. It's holiday specific. But if you said, "Oh, what's leftovers? That's a fast casual place. What food is that?" If you said it's Thanksgiving food, everybody knows exactly what that is, and everybody wants it. I would eat there once a week.
So would I. Yeah.
What are we doing?
Okay.
This is the last episode of Kings of Columbus.
That's right.
We're starting leftovers.
Look for leftovers coming to Polaris soon.
It might be the best idea I ever heard. You're a genius. I have so much respect.
It was your idea. I just took your lead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What are you thinking about besides our new business?
Yeah. Did we talk? I forget. Did we actually talk about my philosophical question on giving the middle finger?
No, we teased it. We teased it.
So I was driving like 2 weeks ago, and like I try not to do this because, frankly, these days it can be a little dangerous. Yeah. So, but I ended up flipping someone the bird while I was driving, and I got caught in between. And like I'm not going to actually stick my middle finger out, but like I was like, do I go thumb out or thumb in? Like I wasn't sure what to do, and then I had a 10-minute conversation in my head with myself about like what is the proper way to give somebody the middle finger, and I still don't know the answer.
Do you feel like you've done it both ways in your life?
Yeah.
Thumb out, thumb in.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have long fingers or no?
No. Probably probably above average, but yeah.
I have long, skinny fingers. So if I'm mad, if I really want to give it, then I'm going no thumb because I want that long, skinny middle finger hanging out there.
Yeah.
Like a tree limb, just like by itself, nothing distracting it. Right. Because it's just so fingery. But if it's a little more casual, like if you're just doing it to Ari, like you're walking away, it's like, whatever. Then I think you stick out the thumb. So I do think it's like no thumb is a little more proper. It's like, I mean this. This is serious. That's my finger. And it's just my finger. But if it's like, bro, you're then I think you put your thumb out.
I think hand shape might actually be pretty important here. Like, because I have a wider hand. I don't have super long fingers, but I have a wide hand, and that I think makes me want to go thumb out, just like increase the surface area even more. It's like, well, that's a big hand. It's giving me the finger right now.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Yeah. So, but I think you're right. If you have like really long fingers, they're like prominent fingers. You just want people to know that's like, it's a rigid one finger salute.
Yeah,
and I think that is impactful too.
So I had a confrontation on the road when I was in high school or in college, but back in my hometown with two of my friends, that began with me giving the finger to somebody and ended with like one of my friends getting in a fight in a parking lot with people in the car behind us. It was not great. But I got a disorderly conduct citation, and I was told by the cops that like giving the middle finger is disorderly conduct in and of itself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like that's what I did. That's why I was cited, because I gave the finger to start it. So
you have a record? Who knew? I didn't know that.
I did. You can look it up. Yeah. It's not expunged. So I don't know. Maybe the people who hired me here did not know that previously, but yeah, wasn't great. So just be careful out there. But also, like, road rage is nothing to joke around about. Like, the world is a far too dangerous place right now in a way that is crazy. But like us running around giving the middle fingers to people is not helping. So, but sometimes you can't help it. I don't blame you. That happens sometimes.
Sometimes it happens, and you just want to, when it does happen, you sort of make sure you're rising to the occasion and doing it the right way.
Yeah. No, right. You don't want to waste. You don't want to have a lousy. You want to be into it.
Yeah.
Don't waste your finger.
Right.
All right. So I'll talk about the Heisman for mine for the last thing we've talked about a little bit. I know Brian Kelly from LSU said that, like, he told people vote early, vote often for Jaden Daniels, the LSU quarterback. Like, he's joking around, but he's also trying to make a case for his guy, because the Heisman ballots are already out now, which is ridiculous, but that you can vote before conference championship weekend. But Jaden Daniels has been perceived as this favorite by people because he has crazy stats for LSU. LSU has 3 losses, and it has flipped now, because I thought Jaden Daniels was the favorite. As I look now, Bo Nix is the favorite at -175. Jaden Daniels is +140. Michael Penix is 16-1. Jalen Milroe is 100-1. Like, I would put some money on that, because I don't think it's impossible that he wins. If he destroys Georgia's defense, and if Penix and Nix are like, and Jalen Milroe destroys Georgia, I think he's going to win. Yep. So I'm not saying he should win, but I think he's going to win. So I'm already preemptively mad at the South for, like, are they not going to vote for guys? But I really have just come around on the idea of, I think it is, and I don't think it's wrong. It's very hard to win it if you don't play conference championship weekend. You've got to be Lamar Jackson. As good as Jaden Daniels is, I don't think he's Lamar Jackson. So then, to me, his team's not good enough, and I'm not going to apologize for that. So, like, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not voting for Jaden Daniels #1 in the Heisman race. I'm not saying he won't be on my ballot, but he put up big stats in the 3 games they lost. But man, if you're just not going to be in the mix, I always vote on story of the season. Jaden Daniels is not part of the story of the season. I'm sorry. Michael Penix and Bo Nix and Marvin Harrison Jr. are. And Jalen Milroe, if he beats Georgia, will be. So I don't know why people pretend that it's just like, he's accounted for 50 touchdowns, he's got to win it. It's like they lost to Ole Miss, brother. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Did you vote for Caleb Williams last year?
I can't remember. Who were the other candidates last? Wait, I got to look now.
Stetson Bennett, CJ Stroud.
I think I voted for Caleb Williams by default, because there was nobody else to vote for.
There was no one else to vote for. Yeah. Which is like the way that I think a Jaden Daniels could win it, but this is just not that year. Right. Yeah.
No, because Penix or Nix will be someone to vote for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I voted for Caleb Williams, but I think I did a thing. I thought Caleb Williams was like, I did something last year where it was like, if you looked at the last 20 years of the Heisman, like, Caleb Williams was like the 33rd best candidate, and he won it. Like, there were multiple years where the guy who finished second or third had a better resume than Caleb Williams did. But at least he played conference championship weekend and played well while his team lost. Jaden Daniels is going to be sitting at home. So I'm glad at least the betting line adjusted to it now. The idea that he was the favorite at any point, knowing LSU wasn't going to play, was just not understanding how the Heisman does work and should work. And again, the only thing is the South is nuts, and they vote in a block, and they don't acknowledge anybody that doesn't live in the South, which is why we created a show to combat that.
Do you think does the Southern voting block theory, which I agree with, like, will they all just pivot to Jalen Milroe, or do you think they could be split between the two? Do you think
I think they'll all pivot.
Yeah.
I think they'll have a big meeting and they'll all pivot to Jalen Milroe. And if not, then the rest of the country that, has cognitive function is going to have to rally around the winner of the Washington-Oregon game, or we're going to wind up looking back 25 years from now and being like, Jaden Daniels?
Yeah.
I'll have to double check this list. I think if you look at, like, the worst Heisman winners in history, they're probably all from the South, because the South votes as a block and is like, Danny Werfel. It's like, okay. We'll do that on the other show. That's
Yeah.
more of a Kings of the North conversation, but I'm assuming it to be the case.
We did. I think we mentioned this on Kings of the North, but just for anybody who didn't catch that, you think Marv's going to go to New York?
I don't think it's guaranteed. Don't think it's guaranteed, but I think he has a chance. But if they would have won, he would have had a very compelling case, especially if he would have gone and put up 200 yards on Iowa this weekend. So
yeah, it was definitely there for the taking, and team results matter. I guess so. He's not gonna...
just a very complicating factor again that like neither Georgia nor Michigan nor Florida State with Jordan Travis hurt really have Heisman guys. Texas doesn't, like Quinn Ewers isn't going to win the Heisman. Texas doesn't really have a guy. It's just like very odd. It's a very odd year that the best teams don't have an outstanding candidate, and then that complicates things. But two of the best teams do have outstanding candidates in Bo Nix and Michael Penix. So.
Yep.
All right. That'll wrap it up for this edition of Kings of Columbus. We know Ohio State's not playing this week. We know this is not what Ohio State fans were hoping for this week, but we're going to keep bringing you content that we think is worthwhile, that we think is interesting, that we think Ohio State fans care about. We're not going to just like force feed stuff down your throat if we don't think it's worth it, but we do think we're going to be able to come up with things that are worth it. And by the way, like we didn't go into it on this show. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. Ohio State has an outside shot if like four things happen. An outside shot at still being alive in the playoff. Bill and I will plan to do a live Kings of the North. If you don't follow our Kings of the North YouTube channel, we'll do that live on Sunday after the playoff announcement, talking about everything that was done by the committee. So if you're watching Kings of Columbus and thinking like, what? Kings of the North? What's it? Go find us on YouTube. KOTNCFB, Kings of the North YouTube. You'll find it. And we certainly would invite you there.
Sorry, we'll have Mike put a link to that channel in the description of this video.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you want to come hang out there, we'd love to have you. But we certainly appreciate you guys watching us here on Kings of Columbus. And again, if you want to be a tech subscriber, 614-662-4509. There's going to be stuff happening in the portal with Ohio State, one way or another. There's going to maybe be other newsy things that happen. And so if you want that news, that insight, that analysis, that inside information, you can try it for 2 weeks free at 614-662-4509. You send the text to that number. All right. So Mike Urostowski, our great producer, made all these graphics to help us make this show more interesting. So we always appreciate his great work on this. And we always appreciate you guys letting us come into your lives for a couple hours each week. For now, for Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of Columbus.